Good evening and welcome to another episode of Mowing After Dark here on the College Football Mafia Network. I am your host, Moen. He is your co-host, Rock, aka Rock and Rant. I'm just going to call him Rock from now on. It's easier, one syllable. That's a preference. How you doing tonight, Rock?
I'm doing good, man. A wild week in a wild week in everything, I would say, is a good way of putting it. And college football was no different. And we have breaking news today, even. So it's good to be able to talk about college football with you tonight.
Yeah, we've got breaking news on top of breaking news here.
That's absolutely true.
Lots of stuff to talk about tonight. Got some new overlays we're going to use tonight. We're going to have some fun, guys. I did not get the soundboard updated yet, but I will get that updated here shortly. Let's say hello to some people who came in here early. Jacob Cat, he's here. Good to see you, Jacob Cat.
What's going on?
Ryan Willie is here. He says hello, CFM. Hello, Ryan. Good to see you.
Hey, Ryan.
Chip left for Vegas. Doesn't it seem apropos that a Chip went to Vegas?
And he's betting on black.
Vegas. Yeah, he's betting on black and silver. We'll see. We'll talk about it. You'll get my thoughts on it. John Dry, the ACC has a road to nowhere for now. Daniel Gygax is here. He says, hi, everyone. Yeah, Daniel, good to see you. Contributor on the Big 12 Mafia Show, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. on the College Football Mafia Network. Daniel also has his own series of short videos here on the channel, Just the Facts with Dan Gygax. A new one went up yesterday about G6 schools and big entertainment from small schools. So definitely check that out. Give Dan some feedback. Give him a thumbs up. I'm sure he would appreciate it. Bob Swanger, Nittany Lion, is in the house saying, hey, everyone. Good to see you, Bob. VC Noel says, good evening, friends. Good evening, VC Noel. VC Noel, if you're not familiar, if you're a Florida State fan or just want to see what those Florida State Seminoles are up to, check out VC Noel and Ryan on Garnet and Old. You can find them on Twitter and on the YouTube here.
Really good show.
Yeah,
absolutely. And like for people who like want to talk to even your biggest rivals and have it with like a filtered approach because you're a fan, but not insane propaganda. Like I think that they do a great job.
They do. Fantastic show. Thanks for stopping by, Vince. Nathan Campbell's here. He says, hi, guys. Good to see you, Nathan. Antoine Johnson. Hey, y'all. Good to see you, Antoine. Rob Ellen, good evening, and hopefully ACC goes the way of Blockbuster in the next 5 years.
Well, it's definitely not going the way of Netflix, but, maybe we'll stick around and people will be fighting over what is better, the AAC or the ACC. Yeah, you know me.
Yeah, you say it's not going Netflix. I'm just waiting for the ACC Netflix media deal to come out now. Now that you've spoken into existence. Caleb Ramirez is here in the house. Hi, all. Good to see you, Caleb. Thanks for stopping by. And Brett Taylor, FSU and Clemson are working as hard as possible to get out of ACC. It probably won't happen by 26 or 27, which is what they were hoping, but it will happen. We will get into the ACC media extension, the new payment breakdown, the new circus seal on Notre Dame that Jim Phillips is performing. But we will talk about all that. But let's get to some breaking news tonight. We've had 2 coaching changes over the last hour, affecting 2 of the biggest brands in America. Ohio State, Chip Kelly, has decided to take his pursuits back to the NFL. And he is going to the Las Vegas Raiders. I always have to correct myself. I want to say Oakland Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders. And just in the last half hour, we found out that Ryan Grubb, who was unceremoniously dismissed from the Seahawks organization, is going back to team back up with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. So coaching changes, carousel continues to turn. I still don't think the New Orleans Saints have a head coach yet. There's still one more slot left to be filled, I think, in the NFL, but got a lot of these coordinator positions coming up. I mean, Ohio State has lost 3 coaches in the last week. They've lost defensive coordinator, offensive line coach, offensive coordinator.
And Minnesota's lost a couple of coaches too. They lost one to Miami. They lost another one defensive line coach to the pros today or yesterday. I can't remember anymore.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately for Ohio State. That is just what happens when you're successful. When you're successful, people want to copy that success, and they will get into that, get in there and try and snatch and steal and scrape everybody away from you. But I told somebody before the show started here, just chatting back and forth, this Kelly news wasn't really supposed to break till tomorrow. I had a heads up about it, but it wasn't actually supposed to break till tomorrow. So it's unfortunate that the kids who are part of the program are seeing this out on Twitter first. I hate that. That's one thing we talked about earlier this year. I hate when journalists rush to be first because I think they don't think of how it impacts other people, but that's journalism for you. But yeah, I mean, I just got to put my faith in Ryan Day. He's the guy who brought in Chip Kelly. He's the guy who brought in Justin Fry. He's the guy that brought in Jim Knowles. So I got to put my faith into him. Now, who is he going to get? I've heard all kinds of candidates now. I've heard they're going to offer Joe Brady of the Buffalo Bills a $10 million deal to come out of the NFL and back into college athletics. I don't tend to believe
that seems like somebody got a little bit too much fentanyl from whatever country of choice, to be honest. But I have a couple of questions for you on that, and then you go into those coaches. I don't think I'm personally surprised that Chip Kelly is going back to the NFL. I'm surprised as an outsider that he's going back to the NFL right now after just 1 year, knowing their history together, that he willingly left a head coach job. Like, I think he probably could have got an OC job last year in the coaching cycle in the NFL if he had wanted to. Certainly could get one next year if he wanted to. I guess I'm just surprised that, not that he did it, or not that there was interest, but after just like one and done at Ohio State, even though he's also been somebody who's moved around fairly frequently over the last 15 years. So were you surprised that it happened now, not that it wouldn't have happened like next season?
I wasn't shocked it happened now because they won a championship this year. I mean, if Chip Kelly's goal was to win a championship, he's won one. He's won one in the college ranks now.
Right.
I believe he also has one in Division III college football ranks, if I'm not mistaken. So, listen, now he's trying to win that ring in the NFL. I get it. Part of your legacy in the NFL is going to be the guy who blew it all up at Philadelphia and left a bad taste in people's mouth. You went to San Francisco and somehow managed to do even worse. I think he wants to get that out of people's memory. He wants to go back and have a successful career in the NFL, even if it's just as an offensive coordinator. I also don't think that Chip Kelly was a big fan of the recruiting. I think he loved offense and just do all that and not have to worry about recruiting kids, NIL, constantly trying to swat down people who are poaching your star players. Probably not for him.
Well, I assumed when he went to Ohio State that was a known, that he was going literally to coach and to game plan and scheme. I personally never thought that he was going to do any recruiting for Ohio State other than maybe like talk to the players when they were there or talk to the quarterback. But the heavy lifting would be between Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, whoever it might be. You know that stuff better than me. So I guess I just wouldn't have expected that to be a factor because I didn't expect him to do jack of that when he went to Ohio State to begin with.
Well, and to be fair to Chip Kelly, while he was doing his consideration of the position that was offered to him, he did fulfill all his recruiting trips. He's been on the recruit ever since they won that national championship. Him, Ryan Day have been on the recruiting trail, recruiting kids. So Justin Fry, we lost Justin Fry to the Arizona Cardinals. He was doing the same thing. You can't just have one coach out there trying to recruit. You got to have everybody, all hands on deck with recruiting, talent evaluations. But the hard part is too, Jeremiah Smith just got done telling everybody he's not leaving Ohio State. Nope, no, not for $4.5 million. And now that Chip Kelly is gone. More people are going to try and interfere and try and poach this young man and poach Carnell Tate, Ennis, Julian saying, poaching is going to come back up again. It's unfortunate, but it's, I put it in the group chat at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It's a mentality you have for the football players. It's next man up. You've got to just be the next man up and do the best you can and continue that tradition of excellence. And I think Ryan Day's going to get a good one in there. He knows offenses. He does a good job with hiring offensive coordinators. I don't think Hartline's going to move up. I've seen a lot of people suggest that Hartline should just become the sole offensive coordinator. I don't think that's Hartline's strength. I think he's shown that, and I don't think that's his passion. I think he loves to work with wide receivers. I think that's what he really loves to do, and I think Ryan Day is going to let him do that. So I do think they're going to get an outside offensive coordinator.
If that's the case, though, why has he interviewed for other jobs other than leveraging to get a raise at wide receiver right back there? Most coaches are, at least at his stage, where they haven't done it and maybe washed out at a higher position, are looking for both the bag, right, and growth in their careers to position themselves, whether it's to jump to the NFL, to get a head coaching job or not. Is that like just a gut there that Hartline just knows his lane and is okay being like the best wide receivers coach and recruiter in college football, essentially, to many?
I think at the time you're talking about the West Virginia job, obviously, that Brian Hartline
Right.
interviewed for. He did a video interview with them. I think at the time you got to remember that was coming off the Michigan loss. There was a lot of speculation, a lot of urging from fans that Ryan Day not be retained. And I think that was Brian Hartline trying to put himself out there and say, hey, if this position becomes available at Ohio State, I would like to be considered for the head coaching job at Ohio State.
Right.
But I mean, I have not heard anything about Brian Hartline leaving. So, and knock on wood, I think that's the one guy we could not afford to lose. I mean,
it's the one guy I want you to lose the most, personally.
Everybody in college football wants us to lose Brian Hartline.
I want him to go on a friggin' spaceship far, far away, if all possible. Coach the global galactic team somewhere.
Absolutely, but I mean that's not going to happen. He's an Ohio State guy. They pay him very well. I'm sure he's going to get another raise out of this. Ryan Day's working on his newest extension. So we'll see what happens. I've got to put my faith in Ryan Day at this point because, I mean, look, he hired Bill O'Brien last year. Bill had to leave. He went to Boston College, and that was we understood why. He had family up there, and his son was going through some stuff. So we understood why. But that was a widely held great hire. I mean, because Bill O'Brien came over, we got McLaughlin and Sayan from Alabama. So we got two fantastic players.
Oh, yeah. Other than the fact that the Penn State situation for the defense coordinator was unexpected from an outsider perspective, I don't have any doubt that Ohio State will be able to get qualified candidate at the top of the food chain. My question was more just around, I was surprised that Chip did it this soon, not that he did it, period. Really basically off the strength of, thank God Michigan beat you and Ryan Day gave him control to do what he probably wanted to do before. That's what it seemed like from an outside perspective again. And just what the Brian Hartline situation is. That aside, somebody in college football is probably going to be crying within a week if it's not somebody coming back to college from the pros. I don't think, our Buffalo guy is the one who's going to do that. He's in line for a head coach job next year.
I think so too. And the same thing, Kellen Moore was another name I heard thrown around, the offensive coordinator.
And Kellen Moore is he's getting a second round of interviews for the Saints. He's the guy unless something weird happens with the Saints.
Yeah, so I know people want to shoot for the stars at Ohio State, but this has been said a lot. You got to trust the process. You got to trust Ryan Day to do the evaluation and put the guy in there that he wants in there. But we'll see. Again, I don't have any names for you. I've heard fans throw around Joe Brady and Kellen Moore. Those are not, as far as I'm concerned, legitimate candidates. That is stargazing and daydreaming. That's just not going to happen. But, I mean, look, he took Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State, and Jim Knowles just got paid $10 million to go to Penn State. So the man can evaluate talent. That's one thing he can do.
Can't beat Michigan, but everything else so far so good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes he doesn't let that talent do the job. He thinks he knows better, but I think he learned his lesson with that, and I think that's why they're national champions. But
Yeah.
I think once Chip Kelly got that national championship, I kind of think the writing was on the wall. I think he's like, hey, I've done this now in my career. I've got a national championship at the FBS level. Let me go into the NFL and get another try. And I don't know what the draft capital looks like for the Las Vegas Raiders, to be honest with you. I don't know if he's
That's
what he's
not a
looking at.
hey, getting your ring in 2 years kind of job, barring something miraculous. I mean, they're not, who knows what's going to happen, but they're not in a position. They're not getting the number one pick, most likely, unless like Tennessee truly doesn't want a quarterback. But it depends upon what happens after the combine. Like, who knows? Maybe Shedeur Sanders falls to them, but I don't know. What seems like they're in a few-year rebuild there. I don't if he has the patience to do it, unless somebody just wants to come and work for Tom Brady, which is entirely also possible. Maybe Pete Carroll wants another go around with Russell Wilson, as has been rumored, but we don't know yet. I don't know. Chip Kelly would want that play. Like, that doesn't really seem like a great fit. That doesn't seem like a great fit to me, but
I think all the gas is out of Russell's tank. God bless him, but I think that ship has sailed and then some. Sailed way over people's heads. Okay, so moving on. Ben Grubb, confidant of Kalen DeBoer, head coach at Alabama. This broke right after the Chip Kelly thing broke, pretty much. He was let go by the Seattle Seahawks in the offseason. He is now returning to Alabama. He's reuniting with Kalen DeBoer. This is the same duo that put together Heisman Trophy candidate Michael Penix, a guy who was fighting for a starter position at the Indiana Hoosiers. What do you think about that move?
That's like the biggest non-shocker of the year, right? Like once things didn't work out there up in Seattle in the NFL, and based off of everything that was going on in Alabama, it's like two people who really need each other, right? And it was probably really close. I mean, was technically pretty close to happening last year before the NFL came calling, and the chance to stay in Seattle was there. Maybe that jump starts, the transition to a quarterback that fits better for both systems. I don't really know that they have it from his recruiting yet ready to go. I think they're still probably working with somebody who came in under Saban, but maybe is a better fit for his offense than Jalen Moore was. But that seems like a very smart move to get his wingman back in place to try to turn around not a bad season, but a bad season for Alabama, where the pitchforks are already after the guy after a year.
Yeah, and that's, it's the same thing Ryan Day experienced at Ohio State, and I was guilty of it too. Expectations are high. You got to meet expectations or people will call for your head. My question is, Ben Grubb is kind of like the Chip Kelly to Kalen, Kalen DeBoer, the way Chip Kelly was to Ryan Day. Do you think, obviously not from a mentor, obviously Grubb's a little younger than Kalen DeBoer, but from that same kind of synergy of knowing what the other one's thinking, they have to break in a new quarterback next year. So they could be just installing a new offensive system. But they've got, one of the things that makes the Ohio State job so attractive, they got a lot of weapons at Alabama. They got Ryan Williams there for at least another 2 years, I believe. I believe he was a true freshman this year as well. So, I mean, that's got to be attractive to a guy like Ben Grubb to look at that and say, yeah, I can get my quarterback in here, install my offense, and I've got listen, this kid is right up there with Jeremiah Smith, and I love Jeremiah Smith, but this kid made some insane plays this season. I mean, just there were games that kid basically carried that offense. So it's got to be a big deal for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they have to, whereas Jeremiah was, put in the spotlight and surrounded by a quarterback who could get him the ball consistently and then a winning season, Alabama is not the Nick Saban Alabama. And if they don't put the right tools around him, he is somebody. I mean, Alabama has had a decent amount of people who were in their top one or two rotation-wise leaving for the portal. I know Ohio State has lost talent, but it has been more like the from a broad perspective, more of like the second or third man up that would probably be there in 2 years, as opposed to, if he wasn't feeling good after spring, would you have thought anything would be impossible that he would enter into the spring portal and get like massive demand if he wasn't feeling good? So I think doing everything they can to make sure he's in a position to succeed as a wide receiver like Jeremiah Smith did on a more consistent basis is critical for Alabama and for keeping him.
Yeah, and similar, Jim Knowles talked about it in the offseason when they brought Caleb Downs in from Alabama to Ohio State. And Jim Knowles basically had to have a 3-hour conversation with the young man and explain the ins and outs of his defense and what he was willing to do and how he was going to use Caleb Downs. I think we're to the point in college football where you're going to see some of that. I think some of these guys that come in for these jobs are probably going to, at some extent, I mean, it's just like the NFL. These superstar players, if you want to keep them on your roster, you might have to give them a little more institutional control over things like, hey, I like that guy as an offensive coordinator. I like this guy. I don't like that guy. Maybe I don't,
Right.
And it's unfortunate because we don't have contracts. We have memorandums of understanding. Whether they're legally enforceable or not, that's up to anyone to decide. Lawyers argue both sides of it, which most lawyers do. Billable hours remains undefeated. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it almost feels more like at the top levels of college football, not across everything. I mean, not even across all of the P4, but in situations like that, it almost feels more like the NBA of coaching and players, where star players can help determine that a lot more than even the NFL might be. Like, in the NFL, I think you still have to have, that level of seniority and reputation. Bad example because that hasn't worked out, but an Aaron Rodgers, right, can command his offensive coordinator until he couldn't, right? Now he can't because that didn't work out well. But I think those situations, they have to at least feel comfortable, even if they're not, quote unquote, picking their coordinator.
Absolutely. Let's do a little reset here. You're watching Mowing After Dark on the College Football Mafia Network. We've got about 185 people watching us between YouTube and Twitter. If you are watching us on Twitter and you enjoy what you see, would you consider coming over to the YouTube side and giving us a like and a subscribe? If you're watching on YouTube, you can do that as well. Those things are free, don't cost you a dime. Help us out tremendously on the channel, help boost us in the algorithm. And then also, we've got some new overlays here. If anybody leaves a super chat or a super sticker, gives some membership or something, we've got some new overlays. Show you a little one of these hot milk. We've got hot milk here on Mowing After Dark.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Got a little Crown Royal, a little Georgia Tech here for you too. And we'll
anybody knows anybody at Crown Royal, let us know. Endorsement deal for Mowing After Dark available.
Please.
NIL for Mowing.
Please give me that NIL deal. That way I can determine who the master brewer is up at Crown Royal in Canada. Get that payday. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you like what you see, please like, subscribe. If you're watching us on demand or watching a clip of this show that we've cut up, feel free to leave a comment. We respond to comments in the comment section all the time. And follow us both on Twitter. You can see both our Twitter handles there, at Mowing After Dark for me and at Rock and Rant for Rock. And we give hot takes and cold takes all week long on Twitter /X/ whatever you want to call it. So let's get back into your comments. That's one of the things we do at the show. We're gonna do some comments, and we're gonna talk about the ACC media deal, where that leaves Miami, Florida State, Clemson, etc. But I want to get to, I know we're backing up on comments. We got a lot of comments rolling in here, so I do want to get in here and say hello to some more people. Let's see. Brett Taylor, they could hire Art Briles. Yeah, that's. I know you're just kidding, but let's not even kid about that. Not even kid about that. Mosito X. Hello, everyone. Good to see you, Mosito. Speaking of coordinators that left Ohio State, Greg Schiano left Ohio State. Nathan Campbell says Arizona has lost a coordinator to the Cowboys. Okay, I did not know that.
That was an inspiring hire in Dallas. I don't mean your coordinator. I mean,
you're talking about when they promoted Schottenheimer, yeah.
Yes.
They'll never win a championship game with Schottenheimer at the helm. Daniel Gygax says the Raiders were rebuilding for the past decade. I can't argue with you. Scavin, yes. Hello, gentlemen. Go Big Red. Good to see you, Scavin. Sorry to hear you're not having a spring game this year. I don't know that I agree with that decision. We'll talk about it. Jacobra Cat, like the reluctant joy, wrought by chains and ankle cuffs, a la the story of O. CFP's open slots are destined rewards for playing games between conferences. Okay, that was a lot to unpack. Thank you for the super chat.
Wow, like there's a bunch of people who are going to have to go Google stuff right now.
I'm afraid to Google. See, people tell me to Google things, and I don't want to Google them, So, but thank you for the super chat. We're going to let you cook, brother. As soon as I can find the media assets and let you cook.
Let him cook. Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said, let him cook.
Thank you again, Jacobra Cat. Much appreciated helping us keep the lights on here. We'll give you a little visual of that. We're going to let you cook, brother. Cook them up with the story of O. But I am not Googling that. Not tricking me. Not since 2 Girls, 1 Cup, man. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Keep me out of the loop. Daniel Gygax says Brian Ferentz for offensive coordinator for Ohio State University. I'd love to have him as the O-line coach.
I would love him to be your OC. It would be the best prevent offense in the Big Ten.
Yeah, watch it. Brian Ferentz would come to Ohio State as offensive coordinator and win a national championship. That would make everybody at Iowa super, super happy. I'd love him as an offensive line coach. The man knows how to coach offensive line and recruit offensive linemen like no tomorrow. Happy Groundhog Day. 6 more weeks of winter. Yes. Unfortunately, Buckeye Chuck did the same as Puxatawny Phil and saw his shadow. Nathan Campbell says, how fast does the ACC fall apart after 2030? Okay, that's a good lead in. Thank you for that, Nathan. Let's talk about it. This week, it was announced that ESPN had extended their media rights deal with the ACC for their Tier 1 media rights through 2036. Part of that agreement is brand payouts, which is going to pay certain brands at the top of the ACC, like Florida State, Miami, Clemson, a little more money than the other brands. In addition to that, Notre Dame gets even more flexible scheduling with the ACC. I know they've got it scheduled this way now, but even beyond 26-27, they get to have a combination of Clemson, Florida State, and Miami pretty much every 3 years. I think they rotate home and aways with those. So
I think they'll wind up when it's all said and done, instead of it be like 2 of those 3 every year, it'll be 3 out of 3 most years. Like those schools will probably play 5 out of every 6 years at the worst case, just because there's too much money to be left on the table.
I don't disagree with you. And this is listen, you're not a Florida State fan. You're not a Clemson fan. You weren't involved in the legal wranglings against the ACC. We don't know how those are going to shake out yet. There's a lot of people. I'm of the belief I think they're going to settle and just kind of everybody kumbaya, peace and love for the next 6 years. You're an ACC guy. What do you think about it?
Well, I think there's still a couple of things that we need to find out before I settle on an opinion, right? Like at a top level with what we know now, to me, it's just like everybody's playing ball control game for right now, trying to reduce the amount of cycles and just like playing it out to like wait for their time to score the winning touchdown, which has just been punted a few years down the road. If we don't, there's a couple of things. If we don't hear, and so far we have not heard that ESPN has actually added more money into the deal. Right now, all we know is that the option they had to keep going with the terms they had is what's gone on. So that means that all of the teams in the ACC for this new brand deal have to kick out money that they were going to get to support this brand deal. So if you say, that they're getting $50 million in a year in the future. It's probably where ACC is, if not this year and next year, the year after. And each school basically takes a 20% reduction. So that there's $10 million per school thrown into a kitty of $170 million. Well, depending upon how they break it out, like on a given year, if a school does really well on the field, which would take away from the Success Initiative, which is funded through 2031, the money that SMU is not getting at all, and the reduced rates that Cal and Stanford are getting, that's where that money comes from, right? That's what you do well, you play in a better bowl game, you go into the playoff, you win it all, you can get a lot more money, I think up to like $20-25 million if you were to win the title, the national championship, right? So that could catch you up on a given year. We don't know exactly how they're going to break out this brand initiative and how much money is in the pool taking away from everybody else. But if you look to like 2029 as an example, the gap between the ACC and the Big Ten and or SEC is $40 to $55 million per year, right? So even if like you're Florida State and you bounce back from last year and you go back to where you were, like one of the top 1 or top 2 TV draws in the ACC, and you get back into the playoff and you do really well, it's hard to imagine how much they're going to give up in the media rights for the existing schools to get a school to close that gap to $40 or $50 million. Like, maybe they're going to do that because maybe enough bottom schools in terms of brand and ratings are fearful of being the next Washington State and Oregon State. But it is hard to also predict your revenue that way. So, if Florida State and Clemson are ultimately successful in their negotiations with settling to get the grant of rights, if not reduced in actual years, reduced in the cost of the penalty for the buyout of the conference, plus the nature of the years being reduced, then it's kind of a win. Like it's a half win. It's sort of fun. It's better than nothing. But it still, I don't think, ultimately settles the big issue, because the big issue is not also going to be solved by private equity. Now that we see that Big Ten is going to private equity, right? If the ACC, Big 12 were to close that gap further with private equity, if the Big Ten comes in, they're going to extend the gap right back to where it was. So, that's my long babble about it. Like, I think it's like a punt, ultimately. Down the road a few years, kissing your sister, whatever like bad analogy you want to use, that's kind of what's gone on.
Yeah, the Titanic has hit an iceberg, and you get to be in one of the lifeboats.
Right. Like, you're probably going to be cool, like whether you have like the jewel in your pocket from the billionaire and like you never have to see him again at the end of this. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon.
Absolutely. And you brought up a great point. I've seen some people on Twitter, and we've seen everybody come up with their numbers, and I'm not a numbers guy. I can tell you I lose a lot of money on gambling, but outside of those numbers, I don't know anything. But, I've heard people say, well, there's a little more money in there. ESPN's giving them a little more money. And then the source is, I was told. Until somebody corroborates that for me and gives me some hard evidence from somebody in the know, as far as we know, this is just an extension.
As far as we know right now, it is just an extension. I've not seen any hard numbers.
This is no additional money. This is just redistribution of existing money. My question is, we've got the Success Initiative, but if you're also giving more money to the top brands, as it were, doesn't that impact everybody who's not a top brand in terms of the Success Initiative? It
does. Well, look, in theory, any school could both achieve the Success Initiative, and if they're winning more games, they probably will get more of the brand initiative over time, right? Like, you look at Georgia Tech. This year, they're technically one of the top 4 rated TV schools in the ACC. If you go back to some of the videos that Wild Utah's done, you can see that. Granted, that is helped by tremendous ratings on the Georgia game, tremendous kickoff game against Florida State, a very well-watched game with Miami during the middle of the season, or like towards the end of the season, where they beat Miami. The ratings did great, but they're recruiting really well. They're really investing in the program, so that school could do it as well. I think ultimately, what's like trying to figure out like what's the win for Wake Forest, right? It's less. I think it's ultimately a thought process of less about competing, staying within range of a Florida State, a Clemson, a Miami, and North Carolina in revenue. It's trying to keep a floor that you don't fall behind, that brings you closer to the Pac-12 right now, trying to figure out if you can get $10 million a year. Better if you had a $50 million media deal that you should have got, and you have to take a haircut of $10 million off of that to keep it all together, and then fall from, instead of like not getting 50 at all to like 15, you're better off taking 40, right? It's less about being able to compete at the top. It's more about not falling all the way further down from others. Like, you don't want to be the next Oregon State.
Right. 100% of zero is still zero.
Correct.
That's a great point you make, but I just think it's it's got to be a little disingenuous to have a success initiative and then more or less handcuff 14, 15 of your brands and say, well, there's a success initiative. If you guys want more money, be successful. But by the way, we're giving more money to these other teams, which is inherently going to provide more resources for them to be successful.
Well, I think the two parts of it too, right? It was like, there's that, right? In a vacuum, there's that. We have a past example. This wanting uneven revenue thing that caused a big issue in a conference called the Big 12. I don't know if everybody remembers Texas and Oklahoma leaving. And Josh Pate brought it up on his show the other day, which is, okay, so let's say the ACC does this in a very public way. And they had already done the success initiative, but they do this now. If you're Northwestern, you're Vanderbilt, do you really think that this is not potentially coming down? Like, I don't want to hear altruistic stuff about the Big Ten is different and the SEC is different, because eventually greed is greed is greed. And that thing will eventually be the next revenue source that somebody wants to come down. Like, I just have a hard time imagining, if the ACC does this in any degree of what it is successfully, that in X number of years, that model is not just coming to every conference eventually under the same threat, even if everybody's on the Big Ten academic alliance.
Of course, I have a different opinion of that, but you made a great point. Oklahoma and Texas. If the Big 12 knew 6 years in advance that Oklahoma and Texas were out the door, imagine how much better they could have prepared for it. Instead of scrambling the way they did and adding the schools they did, they probably would have added those same schools, because I think those were the best available schools at the time. But, it's just about being prepared for it. So maybe Wake Forest is happy knowing, you're right, for the next 6 years, they've got a place to be. And when that 6 years is up, if they do reduce some of the penalty costs from the ACC side, they're still going to be making boatloads of money off of those penalty settlements for a while. And those schools can start evaluating who's going to be the new additions to the reformed ACC. They could start making overtures, third party, of course, to Memphis, Tulane, South Florida, all those schools. So it's
the other thing, Moen, too, right, is we're all old enough to know when the ACC was definitely imploding by 2027 and 2026, and people were going to leave no matter what, and they were going to exit right away, and they had an ironclad case, and Jim Phillips screwed up by signing the media extension without having everybody sign it, which he probably did. Like, all those things could be 100% true, but they might have been 100% accurate at the time, but circumstances changed and are no longer accurate, right? So it is fun, and we are definitely going to be, and I will be one of those people talking about like what could happen, just like I watch Marvel what if shows on Disney Plus if like Captain America did X, right? That's not what necessarily is happening in this version of the multiverse. I think we have no idea what's going to be the outcome of House if it actually gets approved, and the downstream effects. Like, for all we know, schools are going to find out they really can't afford it to be in the conference, right? We have no idea that they're going to be able to compete at the same level within the bottom part of the P4. We have no idea who's going to be the next Indiana and all of a sudden rise up. Georgia Tech is a great example. And I see Rec talking there, like 3 years ago, like what was going on there right now? Would anybody be surprised if Georgia Tech, with what they're investing, coaching they're having, even though they lost their defensive coordinator as well in the last 24 hours, with what they're investing in a major media market, that their circumstances couldn't change and they could be one of the 3 or 4 biggest schools in the ACC on an ongoing basis? I think so much when you're talking about what could happen in 2031 and the conversation that could start in 2028 is fun as hell to talk about and super interesting. We could rationalize it every single way, and some of it could happen, but the entire thing could completely go nuts this summer if House doesn't get passed, right? Or if House does get passed and a year later, everyone's like, our donors are sick of this. And only Ohio State and 20 others can afford to keep playing that game. We have no idea.
Yeah, we really don't. There's so much up in the air. We only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And that's a great point. But, thinking about it from that point of view, you have to think that this is the time for these schools to start, I don't want to bring politics into it, but presidential campaigns always start the day after election day.
Right.
And right now, if we don't know if it's true or not, that the penalties will be reduced in 2030, 2031, whenever, more in line with when the SEC and the Big Ten both go back to media, and the Big 12 go back to media markets. Now is the time for these schools to start campaigning. And you brought up Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech's a great one to take a look at. Right now, Georgia Tech is making these investments, and I'm sure they're going to continue to make investments in football. Brent Key has been successful there. He's, he probably should have beat Georgia this year. I mean, it was, we can go back and adjudicate that call over and over again, but,
right.
But these schools, Florida State, Clemson, they're not in the AAU yet. Now's the time to start talking to donors, talking to research partners, pharmaceutical companies. Get in here. Please help us. We want to be AAU. We want to make ourselves as attractive as possible. But it can't just be the brands at the top doing that. I think all the brands need to do that. I think Georgia Tech Georgia Tech needs to put themselves out there. I mean, Virginia, great academics, great institution, prestigious, like all hell, but their athletics are not doing great. So, I mean, if they want to be considered possibly for a Big Ten or an SEC slot, they just can't rest on their laurels and say, well, we're Virginia and we're in Virginia.
Yeah, and it goes to show you, too, like, even the conversations change all the time. A year and a half ago, nobody was talking about Virginia anywhere. Then, like, Virginia was all the conversation because that's them and North Carolina together were going somewhere, right? They're going to the Big Ten but no, now they're going to the SEC. And then this last round of conversations, no one has talked about Virginia in the last 5 weeks, about even in the speculation zone, right? They've like completely been pushed to the side. Now it's like UNC and NC State, they're probably going to be tied together at the hip. And, where's Clemson, Florida State, Miami? It keeps changing. And then Georgia Tech comes back. So you want to at least put yourself in the conversation, right? Like if you're Wake Forest, like what can you do to, I don't know, probably not compete with Florida State or Clemson because that's like unrealistic because you have to do other steps first. But what can you do to compete better and position yourselves equally to what Vanderbilt might be to the SEC or Northwestern might be? Like whatever school you want to fill, like who is your peers in those other conferences and how can you be doing exactly what they're doing or more? We know what Vanderbilt just did, right? We saw the season they had with the coaching they did. We know what Northwestern is doing as like an example. So there's the peers within your conference, and then there are your peers within the P4 or P5. Are you competing with those levels? And if you're not, what are you doing? Now, Wake Forest obviously went out and got new coaching, and they poached some people from the defunct Pac-12, right? So we'll see what happens. North Carolina is finally investing. But North Carolina, I don't think has gotten the bump in hype that Colorado got with Deion, because even though Belichick's a legendary coach, he was not a legendary personality, right? He wasn't like a media star. I don't see their recruiting suddenly going nuts. I don't see a shocking portal pull even in the early days, but we'll see what happens with them. But at least they're spending the money and like realize they need to do something.
Yeah. And I mean, great point. Got a super chat here from our friend Mosito Ek, Rutgers Scarlet Knights. ACC only falls apart if the SEC Big Ten come calling. With the ACC doing unequal payouts and having ACC network, they may just kumbaya until a new contract in 2036. You might be right, Mosito, but you got to remember the way these payouts are. The payouts stay pretty much even for the ACC. They don't go up as much as
3 to 5% each year is what their number.
Right. Yeah, which is very small compared to what the Big Ten and SEC are getting with their backloaded contracts. So there's going to come a point in 2031. Right now, they're what, 40 million behind? That could jump to 80 million.
Right. It could jump to 80 million. It could jump to 90 million. It also could be something weird happens and the media market's down, and the Big Ten and SEC don't grow as big the next round. Like, I wouldn't expect that. There have almost never been down rounds in media rights, even as we've transitioned through various cycles. But it's not impossible for the gap to not grow wider in 31 to 36 if ACC is not in a position of renegotiating a deal while the other three go. And it's also entirely possible that the Big 12 completely adds to a third conference that's dusting the ACC for those 5 years, right? So then it's not even just an SEC Big 10 conversation. And we're not even talking about the possibilities of legitimate approaches towards super leagues or private equity or, something else weird happening that we just don't know about. Because almost everything we talk about right now, if we were here 4 years ago, we didn't discuss it all.
Absolutely. And thank you for that super chat, Mosito. Let's give you a little Oh. And of course, as we all know, the natural enemy of the Greg Flugar is a cheeseburger. So whenever Greg is in the chat, we will throw that up, and that'll keep him quiet. So
your super chats have all contributed to bouncing double cheeseburgers.
The bouncing double cheeseburgers. Until I can get Greg to say something that I can misinterpret as dirty about cheese, the cheeseburger will have to do.
You do realize that in a multiverse of college football, Flugar has a brand deal with McDonald's and double cheeseburger consumption.
Yeah, I'm a little over the multiverse at this point. Everything goes to the multiverse when you run out of ideas. Brett Taylor, a member. By the way, guys, we recorded a new members-only video that'll be coming out tomorrow or Tuesday. What hurdles are facing Florida State, the Florida State Seminoles? What are the biggest hurdles facing them on a perceived candidacy towards the Big Ten? It's definitely interesting, definitely something you should check out. We go back and crunch our numbers from last year, look where we made some mistakes, talk about some of the inherent flaws with our model, and talk about how we're going to try and adapt from it. And we talk about some of the intangibles. It's a really interesting video, probably be about 25 minutes long. Definitely check that out if you are a member. And if you're not a member, by all means, you can go ahead and click that cash icon and become a member. Or if you're feeling generous, you can gift memberships to people. We've had 40-some gifted memberships over the last week and a half. And I know there were a lot of Seminole fans in there. They're going to get to see that video. So definitely high quality work that we're putting on here at the College Football Mafia Network. So thank you for being a member, Brett. Nothing has been agreed to. Unequal revenue, Notre Dame scheduling at all are just speculations and rumors and negotiations right now. Florida State and Clemson have formally agreed to nothing.
Well, Brett, here's my take. The ACC is massively incompetent at the commissioner level. However, and I know the settlement hasn't happened, so part of that I completely agree with you, but I'm pretty damn positive if one school had voted against the media rights deal, since they did say the board of the ACC had approved on Wednesday the ACC extension, I would be shocked if somebody had voted against that it hadn't leaked already. Utterly shocked. So I would just say that while those things haven't happened, I think it's more safe than not that some degree of kumbaya is coming. I would think actually the part that is the most at risk is not the Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, whoever, wanting to go to the unequal revenue sharing. I would think the one that would be the most questioned are the Boston colleges and Wake Forest agreeing to it. But knowing the media the way it is and where those things came from, those things didn't leak out without having some degree of assurance that it was like at least heading down that path, even if Florida State and Clemson are hopefully wisely trying to extract the best deal on reducing penalties or grant of rights wherever, or any version that they can do towards that. Like, to me, that's the only part that's in question. I would be shocked if the scheduling doesn't happen with Notre Dame for everybody's in the ACC. I would be shocked if the unequal revenue stuff doesn't happen. The things I want to know are, did ESPN actually put more money in? And what does Florida State and Clemson's settlement talks do to make leaving, if they can, in 2031-ish, with conversations probably ensuing 2028, 2029, what were they able to get to make the exit from the ACC more financially palatable, other than you'll be doing it in 2031 versus 2027, which is inherently cheaper.
And I think there's a lot of mid-tier teams that a lot of people sleep on in the ACC that could push themselves to Georgia Tech. We've mentioned. I think Georgia
Louisville
Tech's for the Big Ten. Louisville, yeah, maybe it's going to be hard.
But their preseason, I mean, they're if you look at all the way too earlys, right?
Yeah.
The Clemson, SMU, and Miami are all in those. Florida State isn't, but they're in that category. We don't have to even worry about what their preseason ranking is as they try to regroup. Louisville is the next team most often featured in the top 25 preseason. Georgia Tech is the one that like sort of follows. So those kind of make sense. North Carolina's TV ratings were terrible this past year, but now it's the Belichick era, so we'll have to see what happens. We'll get that first indication on Labor Day Monday.
Yeah, Louisville, I don't know if I would consider Louisville because, again, I think they would fit in the SEC, and I don't know that the SEC would be willing to take them with Kentucky,
right.
But I'm thinking Georgia Tech, Pitt would be another one I could see Pitt trying to make a push to get into the Big Ten. And they have the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about like who could get the success of the brand initiatives, depending.
Well, Louisville, yeah, absolutely, Louisville can. It depends, Again, this is with NIL being what it is now. We see that a lot of people don't like it, but Ohio State did spend an NIL and went out and won a national championship with it. So if you've got the boosters and you've got the collectives that can bankroll you, you can get success without having resources from your media agreement. Not that Ohio State didn't have resources from their media agreement, but Nitwit, as long as the payouts are similar to the Big 12, all will be well. If the Big 12 gets more money in their next deal, then all hell breaks loose in the ACC. What do you think about that? Now, listen, I'm a guy on the outside looking in. This weekend, battle of the numbers, who is making more money? Big 12 folks and ACC folks clinched in an argument to the death over twos and fews.
It's like I don't really. You're arguing about whether you have a Prius or a Hyundai, right? Yeah. And the other is a driving around in a Porsche. Like, cool. So you have the limited versus the XL version of shit. Yeah, and the numbers are all off too because those deals are fundamentally different. What's not really getting factored in very well from the ACC perspective is the money that they get from the ACC network. People are like comparing one portion of that, and it's not as transparent what the contract is to others. So you're taking a little bit of information, and I think you take the people who are biased one way and the people who are biased the other way, and average all their shit out, and you're probably close to what the real story is.
Yeah, listen, I get it. Tribalism, you're a fan of your conference, et cetera, but
I don't get this fan of your conference thing. Like, I'm not a fan of my conference. I don't really understand that concept.
Well, to be fair, Rock, you guys have never won the ACC conference.
Yeah, but I'd never thought about, like, when we were winning the Big East, I wasn't like, yeah, Big East could give a shit. I don't really care, The only time I've ever really cared about the conference stuff was the last 3 months because I was so sick of hearing about the SEC propaganda network crap, right? And in which case, I wanted anybody that was not there to win, not because I don't think the SEC is the premier conference in college football, because I do, but the narrative was a crock. And so there I was like a little bit like gritting my teeth, ACC, root for the Big Ten until I had no choice. But I'm not rooting for the ACC, and that has literally nothing to like. Money is the money. Whether we won or haven't won is irrelevant. Like, whether you can be in a position to compete if you do a good job is like the main part, right?
Yeah, and I can get it somewhat from the Big 12 perspective. Hey, we're survivors. We had this happen. Everybody,
I get it. I just can't relate to it.
We outlived the Pac-12. We survived. We got stronger. But really, arguing over this money, it's like arguing over who has the most mild case of gonorrhea. It's like congratulations, you both got gonorrhea, but yours is dripping a little less.
Moen, you got shot and I got stabbed, but either way, we're both dead. Like,
yeah, we're both sitting in the emergency room, not getting taken care of. So, Rec Talk. Good to see you, Rec Talk. He was with us on Friday night. Did a masterful Ric Flair impersonation. You will lose if no matter what, if you gamble long enough and no one has a clue with conference realignment. There you go. Proof positive. I'm sure I'm way down over the years for gambling.
Well, you've enjoyed your time.
And people just have educated guesses. I think educated guesses are kind of what everybody has. David with 2 exclamation marks. He's really emphasizing that his name is David. ESPN gave a little more money for Notre Dame playing 2 of the big 3 every year. Again, I've heard that rumor. I just need to see it corroborated somewhere.
The only thing I do know on there is that NBC is going to benefit and Notre Dame will directly benefit from that happening when that rotates, because that actually is in their deal about the strength of the teams that they're playing. ESPN, I have not seen it from, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's been alluded to, it's been alluded to by ESPN-ish writers. I don't think I've seen Ross Dellinger or Pete Thamel. Actually, Pete Thamel's there, but like I haven't seen Ross Dellinger say it as an example, or somebody who's not like directly associated. And it's possible I missed it. I definitely am not like scouring every article to find out if they gave like $10 more because we play Notre Dame at home, Florida State, Clemson, Miami.
Yeah, and David, you might be right. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just I've heard the same thing, but I have yet to see anybody give me some kind of corroboration from a trusted source. So
I can assure you that if that in fact happens, and even if it's not officially public, that I will be able to find out through sources directly that would know. But I haven't heard that yet. But I also haven't asked that question because there's no formal thing done, and it's pointless to ask that question until all of the questions. But I'll ask that stuff the hour after we hear that Florida State and Clemson have settled, if they ultimately do, because then all of the cards will be out and all the schools will know what they're dealing with, and then it will probably leak out from Pete Thamel or Ross Dellinger anyway.
Absolutely. So stay tuned to Moan After Dark. Rock is on the case. He's going to find that out for us. But speaking of which, get your thoughts on it. Notre Dame got everything they wanted, Rock. Got everything they wanted.
Love you. Find somebody who loves you, like Jim Phillips loves to like play with his non-adopted son while he ignores his own kids. Selfishly, I get Notre Dame back all the time, which is my personal and most hated rival. So like there's that win for however long Miami for me is in the ACC, and I do want to see Clemson play Notre Dame. We're all more interested right now, for the most part, with a few exceptions. No disrespect to watching Clemson, Florida State, Miami play Notre Dame pretty much every year than we are seeing it rotate through this other 17 schools on an equal basis. There's just more juice in those games. They either have historic rivalries or they tend to be schools that are at least playing above 500 most of the time.
Listen, I hate Notre Dame. I can't stress this enough, guys. If you haven't been paying attention for the last 2 years we've been doing this, I absolutely hate the Fighting Irish. I hate Notre Dame. I hate the fact that they are snowflakes. Call them the Shamrock Snowflakes. They get everything they want. They get everything handed to them. And the reason that they are not forced to join a conference is because people continue to bend over backwards for them. The Big East did it. Ended up costing the Big East. And the ACC is doing it. And I think ultimately it's going to cost the ACC.
They're sleeping.
If Notre Dame really cared about the ACC, they could end all this. They could become a full member, and the media payouts for everybody on the ACC will go up. Even your Wake Forests and your Syracuses, they would all go up. But they're not in it for the ACC. They're in it for Notre Dame.
And the funny part is, when it's all said and done, you're talking about like you're talking about a lot of money because they got as far as they did this year that they get to keep to themselves. So I'm not dismissing that, though that doesn't happen every year. But on a schedule basis, like you're really talking about they have 5 or 6 games that are not ACC games in a given year. Of those games, there's like 3 that I think we consider like they don't want to ever lose, right? USC, Stanford, and Navy. right? Others have been consistent games and they like to have that flexibility to do what they're going to do. But this is really an argument over 2 or 3 games, right? Because the ACC currently is an 8-game conference. They play 6 games against the ACC, if my scheduling agreement is right. So you're talking about like not joining this conference over 2 games, and the potential of revenue splitting on the football side, and whatever the gap is, the delta between the new NBC deal they have and the ACC media deal. Like that's what it all comes down to. It's not a lot when it's all said and done, but it seems to be an ocean for them to cross.
Absolutely. And I just want to pop this one here a little earlier. David, again, emphasis on David. I hate Ohio State, so what's the point? The point I'm trying to make is that I'm not coming at a Notre. I'm letting you know right out the front. I'm not sneak dissing Notre Dame. I am putting the knife right between that Irish chest bone. I don't like the Fighting Irish. I don't like Notre Dame. I think they're to blame for a lot of what's happened in college football. I think if they'd have joined the Big Ten in the 1990s, I think we'd still have regional conferences. That's just my opinion. That's a what if. We talked about what ifs earlier. What if scenario, but that's just my thought on it, David. And I hate to see that, the ACC, unfortunately, for some reason, Jim Phillips just doesn't at least try and take them to task on it. That's just me. See.
I think there's a lot of us in the ACC, different schools, that would agree with that concept.
Nitwit. Let's all be real here. ESPN is paying a major college football conference 20 to 25% less until 2036. This placing that conference at a competitive disadvantage in order to favor another conference.
Can't argue any of that.
I don't know that the incentive necessarily is to favor the SEC. I think it just worked out that way.
I think now it is.
Well, now it is, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. You can see that just by like how many slots the ACC does or does not get on ABC versus the year ago, right? Even as like one very clear example based off of that deal.
Sure, but I mean, especially with this new Miami, Florida State, Clemson rotation. By the way, I think that just seals it for me that USC is going to opt out of that Notre Dame game. I think that series comes to an end after next year. But that's going to get you at least access to a couple more time slots on ABC. Unless there's like a dynamite game on the SEC that has to be played, like Texas, Ohio State at Texas has to be played in that time slot. Almighty Finn, what up, Moen? Congrats on your natty. Thank you very much. My job is the real reason I haven't been on, but I'm back today. Good to see you, Almighty Finn. I hope you're enjoying this spring that we're having here in Indiana and Ohio. It's supposed to hit 60 degrees here tomorrow. 60 degrees. It was just like 20 below 2 weeks ago. But thanks for coming back, Almighty Finn. Good to see you. David, the Big and SEC don't want that many teams. Their per team payout will drop. That is part of the problem as well. We tackled that in that members only video, David.
We've been talking about that for over a year, David, and you might be new to the channel, but you're not necessarily telling us anything new, just FYI. Yeah.
The only team that adds any media that can tangibly add value to a media deal is Notre Dame. We know that because it's literally written in the Big Ten's contract with Fox Sports.
Yeah.
So,
and it was already already happened already. That's why Washington and Oregon aren't getting 100% share until the next deal. It's not nothing new.
Nitwit, the issue is ESPN has failed to uphold their obligations in the contract. How many big time ACC games are on ABC or ESPN prime time slot? The conflict of interest with the SEC is the problem. You just mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that they're not holding up to their obligations in black and white. Maybe as like a partnership, yes, because the ACC signed a pretty disastrous contract willingly, whether through ignorance or deceit internally. that was what happened, right? So if they don't have carve-outs that you must put us on the mothership X amount of times in their contract, then technically they just have to put them on a network, right? It gets down to that level, which we don't necessarily know. All the things that got released over the last years did not put any of that sort of things into the public that we know those specifically. If there were any contracts that got released by the various hearings, they were blacked out.
And at the end of the day, I mean, it's fun and easy to blame ESPN, but they're a business. They're going to do what makes them the most money. And if the SEC matchup is garnering more viewership and lets them get higher ad rates, they're going to show the SEC matchup.
And there's a reason why in this coming Labor Day weekend, where there's if you look at week 1 schedules, there's a tremendous amount of awesome games that are available to ABC/ESPN. And they're making the decision that, North Carolina is going to be a big story because it's Belichick's first game. That's on Monday night. It could have gone to another great rivalry game or out-of-conference rivalry game that's happening that weekend. They chose that. Miami, Notre Dame is kind of an obvious game to put on Sunday night unopposed. So it's not like they're completely going to SEC both of those nights. They didn't have to go that route. But for the most part, they're going to do what's in their best interest. And unless you have contractual obligations, they're not really technically violating the deal, although they're maybe not the best partners for one. Like I like to say that the SEC is their kid. The ACC is like their stepchild that they kind of like, and the Big 12 is like their foster child.
Yeah. Mosito, Boston College, Wake, and Syracuse are okay waiting for a new contract in 2036. We mentioned this on Friday's show. I'll bring it up again. I'm sure there's a composition clause in there. They're going to get some payout from those teams if they do leave in 2031, but their contract rate is going to be reduced. I'm sure that ESPN put that in the extension too, that, hey, we're not, if Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and Notre Dame aren't here, we're not paying you guys what we're paying you now. Let's see here. Jacober Cat. Good to see you, Jacober Cat. Big 12 already tried it and proved it's a sign of a dying conference. I think he's talking about unequal revenue share.
Yeah. I completely agree with that general concept. That the thing that has fundamentally changed, right, since that moment of what happened with Texas and Oklahoma is that people have also now seen what happened to the Pac-12. So, like, the way that people frame the conversation isn't that, oh, look what happens, those guys leave, we're all fighting. Now they're seeing, oh, wow, if all of these teams leave, whatever year, pick your year, where, we are going to be in a really big world of hurt, even if we backfill with AAC schools or whoever it might be. So there's like a different reality around it, but I don't disagree. There's a reason why the NFL works really, really well. Right on the media side, it doesn't matter if you're the Giants or the Packers, and everybody got rich. There's, in baseball, the national contract is split that way, but the local rights make up a massive difference between what the Tampa Bay Devil Rays get and what the Yankees get.
Yeah. I mean, the only limitations you have in the NFL is your ownership.
Yeah, you can make more on your merch, you can make more on your tickets, right? How big your stadium is, like that's all in its own way, but your level playing field as you're going to get with market disparity.
Absolutely. And it's just a matter of not spending money. They make all this money as owners, and then they will not spend it on their team. I'm talking about you, Mike Brown. It sounds like North Carolina State, and Duke want to stay together at this time. The P2 don't want FSU and Clemson, so nobody is leaving the ACC anytime soon. If they want to stay together, I think they're going to have to stay in the ACC. I can't see all three of those schools finding a landing spot in either the SEC or the Big Ten.
They're more likely to stay in the ACC than go to the one place they probably could all go together with, which was the Big 12. I don't think whatever more money that Big 12 would get if those three schools went would be worth it for them versus what they could probably get in a more regional conference, even if it's diminished.
Yeah.
Plus the hassle factor.
I don't disagree with you. Illini Ted, I don't think Big is looking at unequal revenue sharing, but probably at incentives. PE might be used as a pool for paying out for certain accomplishments. We didn't even get to touch on PE tonight.
But that's the same thing in a different, it's just like, saying it in a different way. It's like It's the difference between everybody has a floor, and if you get 20 touchdowns, you get a performance incentive, versus we can arbitrarily bring your money down. I'm looking at you, reported Big Ten, Wisconsin NIL contract.
We're not even going to get into that tonight. Mr. Ed Wayner, hello, gentlemen. Moen, were you expecting Chip Kelly to be gone after helping OSU win a natty? How will losing offense and defensive coordinator affect Ohio State's win totals next year? I don't think it's going to impact as much as just breaking in a new quarterback, new offensive lineman. Got a lot of new parts that we've got to get on the defense too. We're losing a lot of guys to the draft this year, a lot. So it's going to be a rebuild
last year.
Yeah, it's going to be a rebuilding season for us this year. I think a lot of Ohio State fans know that going in. I think they're okay with that. And again, like I said, Ryan Day, he hired Chip Kelly, he hired Jim Knowles, he hired Justin Fry. So we just gotta keep the faith in the man that he knows how to hire people. Julian says the ACC will dissolve because North Carolina, Virginia, and North Carolina State feels like they will join the SEC. Yeah, they haven't dissolved yet. If that was an option, I think they would have pulled it.
Yeah, I mean, you could sit there and say that maybe that's their plan in 4 years, right? When they want to be able to move. But for now, again, we have not heard one leak of the supposed vote of the board of directors. The board of directors for the ACC is comprised by every school's either president or chancellor, whatever is the highest ranking at that school. ESPN's article reported that the vote to agree to whatever happened in the opt-in, because that's really what it was, which probably had some changes because if it's there's a material change of X% to a contract, the board has to vote. That's how it is supposed to work by the ACC bylaws. Since Wednesday, when that first news broke, we have not heard one story yet that any school chose to vote against it. Maybe they did. But the last time that happened, we heard instantly that North Carolina and Clemson and Florida State did not vote to accept new members, right? We heard about, the Magnificent Seven instantly, essentially. We have not heard, it's rumored that Clemson, Florida State, and North Carolina did not vote for this in this Wednesday meeting in favor of it. Now, they could have not voted, and it still would have gone forward because I think it requires either 2/3 or 3/4 vote for media deals. I can't remember exactly because the last time I studied the bylaws, and yes, I did, was a year ago, when things were moving a lot faster. But I think we would have heard by now if somebody had not voted positively that day. But it would be exciting if somebody didn't, because then we'll have more to talk about.
Yeah, it would work out well for us.
Right now we got 5 years of content ready to talk about when the ACC will actually implode again, even though we had 2 years of it already.
Oh, trust me, there's going to be other realignment stories to follow. In 2 years, the CFP giving each ACC a $7 million bump to college. I think he's talking about revenue. Let's say half is put into that brand. That's 50 million plus another 50 to 100 million. That could be a total of 100 and 150 million.
Yeah.
That ACC can share to just those brands.
Correct. However, the CFP is also giving to the Big Ten and the SEC more than that bump. So, yes, they're going to have more to play with in the pool, but the gap, like we were just talking about the media deal percentages before, we weren't even talking about the disparity in what Big Ten and SEC schools are getting from the CFP playoff in 2026 and beyond. Versus the ACC, Big 12, and G5, it's going up.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's what Florida State and Clemson care about is how do they compete in the total pie of revenue from conference deals in the playoff versus what an Alabama, a Georgia, a Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State are getting from their respective conferences, separate and apart from merch sales, brand deals, ticket sales, etc.
Yeah, and you're right. This is like I mentioned earlier. It's who's got the best case of gonorrhea. There's a gap. That gap is going to be there, guys. This deal does not do anything really for the majority of the ACC. It helps these top schools out, which, as much as I hate to say it, those top schools are what are keeping the ACC glued together at this point. So,
yeah. Again, if we hear that ESPN contributed more to the kiddies, so they, there's additional money in addition to what other schools are willing to give up to this brand pool, and those schools are also successful and dip into the success pool as well as the TV pool. Remember, it's mostly football, but it also considers basketball and other revenue sports. And, that matrix, we have not heard what that means yet. We have heard it is not necessarily a straight TV ratings thing because, like, as Moen knows, in the Big Ten, a couple of games that could have been really big TV ratings games on NBC were shifted to Peacock. So if you're trying to do a brand success deal based off of that, you would theoretically, if the ACC had something similar, like where ESPN and ABC moved a game that could have been on ESPN or ABC to the ESPN app, that's the direct, no cable needed version, so that they could drive subscriptions, that would theoretically hurt somebody that was trying to benefit from this new brand partnership. So the formula hasn't really been revealed yet, other than we're sure it would be leaning to some degree on the TV ratings that we're all familiar with.
And interesting you brought that up, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but we haven't really heard anything about the ESPN direct-to-consumer thing since they bought Fubo.
No, other than venue being demolished before the stadium was even built, we haven't. Like, I would guess that they're going to be if they were in a position to launch it for venue in theory before the lawsuit came for this season, it was supposed to be a few weeks into into the 2024 season. My guess is that we would hear about it for the 2025 season, because they probably were building it on the same underlying architecture that powers all of those. But then again, they have the Fubo platform now that they own, so they could be deciding which one they want to build off of that. But I don't expect that it's a big twist for them to do, if they're especially not even having to cobble feeds from extra partners, if it's all in-house feeds that are now just being put onto one menu.
Yeah, it's got to be tough out there competing against yourself. Everybody,
it's really bad.
Heads down in the chat for ESPN.
Thoughts and prayers.
Julian, Notre Dame should join the ACC and games versus Miami. Well, they've got games coming up against Miami, but I don't think they're going to join the ACC now. They got all the milk with none of the cow.
Yeah, and we weren't saying that like if financially it makes benefit for Notre Dame, really. We were just saying if they really gave a crap about the ACC and want an easy path to staying independent, like that's what they would do. But they're not going to do that. They're getting the money. They're getting everything they want from the CFP and from the ACC. So I get why they're not doing it. I just, if someday karma is going to come back around, and I don't know if we'll be around to see it, but.
Jacobercat, unequal revenue sharing amongst the power conferences is unsustainable. It's the root of the disease. I think he's agreeing with your take there.
Yeah.
David, Notre Dame is locked into the ACC just like any other member, but come on, David, they're not like any other member.
For them to say we're deucing you out, all they have to buy out is the non-media rights portion of the exit fee. The grant of rights for basketball and others, which is a pittance compared to what Clemson or Florida State or Miami would have to buy out. They could raise that money like in a day if they wanted to exit the ACC for all of the non-football sports. I'm not saying they're doing it, but like it's not even the same remote situation. Like for those schools, it's like a $500 million thing. For Notre Dame, it would be under $100 million.
Jacobercat, big stopped at 18 for a reason, Notre Dame or bust. I don't disagree with you, Jacobercat. I think if they could get Notre Dame and Stanford, I think they'd be happy to stick at 20. Almighty Finn says, hey, Moen, next time you're in Indianapolis, smoke and drinks on me. I was almost in Indianapolis yesterday, Almighty Finn, but I decided I did not want to drive 5 hours to sit in some nosebleeds to watch the Royal Rumble. But, yeah, I'll keep it in mind. I got some family in Indianapolis. I get over there once or twice a year. You want to buy me booze and smoke me up? Well, I'll take you up on that offer. I love free booze and free smoke. It's my favorite type. Stormy Cyclone. Hello, guys. Just got home. Good, Stormy Cyclone. I was waiting until you got on before I could do this. So Cheers. Take a little pull off the bottle there. Thank you, Stormy Cyclone, for stopping in. Good to see you, sir. Mr. Ed Wayner, what would happen to CFP payouts if the 10 conferences banned independents, Notre Dame, from competing in the college football playoff? Would ESPN drop the payout significantly?
Nah. It would
I don't think they
ripple.
can. Yeah, they can't ban them outright. If they banned them outright, there's going to be a shit storm. In the scientific sense, a shit storm.
They're a member of the LLC that is the CFP, right? That CFP is its own independent entity with various stakeholders. So they're not going to be able to, in the current iteration that goes past 2025 into whatever the end of the CFP is, that even though that's going to be adjusted in 2026, they are a stakeholder. So,
but I get your sentiment, and I do think that in order to host a home playoff game, you should have to be in a conference.
Yeah, that would be great.
I just don't think it's fair to, Jared Jones, Buckeye coaching staff having a tough day, brother. I hear you. Just got to remember, Ryan Day hired all those coaches. He'll get somebody good in there, and it's a desirable job. Look, you got Jeremiah Smith, you got Julian Sayin, you've got Ennis, you've got Carnell Tate, you've got Peoples, the running back that's coming up. Lots of offensive talent there at Ohio State. So I don't think they'll have trouble attracting a candidate. I just want to, you can go back and watch earlier. I just want people to pump the brakes on some of the candidates that they're coming up with. Nick Saban is not coming to Ohio State to coach offense, guys. Chill out. Stormy Cyclone says, fireman's benefit, just GT myself. Congratulations. Thanks for going to a fireman's benefit. That's always a good thing to remember our first responders. And yes, it's a Sunday night. Go ahead and Georgia Tech. Take a load off. Have a little of the rye whiskey and take it easy.
But if you're on Twitter, before you take a swig, come over to YouTube if you could, and subscribe or at least give the show a like. We would greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Steel Austin says, I don't see how the big stops at 20. They still have to add a few more Western teams to save the former Pac teams from being on an island. Again, I think if they just added Stanford, I think that would be their Western contingency, and I think they would be happy with it. If not, they would probably go for Colorado. Sorry, Big 12 people. Jacobercat says, I think the big will always be two more than the SEC. Very well, could be right. Steel Austin, still too much travel. Fair enough. Earl Carr, the Cougar, member for 19 months. Hey, Moen, problem is certain conferences won't agree to any changes that the SEC and Big Ten want. Problem with that, Earl Carr, is in 2026, they don't have a choice. The SEC and the Big Ten have controlling interest.
Yeah, there's certain things that they can't change, but there are other things that is completely, they have whatever, a 56% voting share. So 56 over 44 means we win, you lose. They just can't say the G5 can't get a bid.
Right. They can't throttle the access or remove access for G5 and independents. That's going to piss too many people off. But I do think that if you're an independent, you should have something, hey, you don't get to host a playoff game because you're not in a conference. Should only go to teams that play in a conference, We got a super chat from our friend Stormy Cyclone. As long as I'm benefiting tonight. Congratulations. Thank you, Stormy Cyclone. We'll give you a little Crown field goal. There you go. The Crown bottle goes through the field goal. It is good. Thank you for stopping in, and thank you for the super chat, sir. We'll give you a little Keith Jackson as well.
We're gonna play football. Yippee!
The great one, Keith Jackson. Thank you again for that super chat, Stormy Cyclone. One last call. If you're watching on Twitter, head on over. We're going to wrap it up here. We're going to do our last call segment. So head over to College Football Mafia on YouTube. And check us out. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. It helps us out. Helps us in the algorithm. Doesn't cost you a dime. And once you start watching us, a lot of times people like Earl Carr are very generous, and they gift memberships. And that gets you access to Wild Ute University and all the great members-only video content and emotes. So thank you, Earl Carr, for being a member for 19 months and for gifting us memberships. Thank you again, Stormy Cyclone, for giving us a super chat for $5. Remember, I didn't play Earl Carr a sounder. Let's give Earl Carr a sounder. Let's see. We haven't done winner in a while.
Winner.
That's what you are, Earl Carr. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Thank you, Earl Carr. All right. Let's go ahead and pop this up here. It is last call. Oh, hold on. It's not last call yet. It's next to last call. Gifted 5 memberships from our friend Earl Carr.
All right.
New
Thanks,
people.
Earl.
Zoe Zucci. I hope I said that right. Trojan Fight. Benjamin Griffin. Dave Chauncey. Sterling Holland. You were all gifted membership by our good friend Earl Carr. Make sure that you thank Earl Carr in the chat if you are here. If you're catching this on demand and you wonder, hey, I got a membership to this new channel and it's got all these cool members-only videos, make sure you drop a comment on the video thanking Earl Carr. Earl Carr did all that for y'all. And that's because Earl Carr is he's the man. And it's legitness.
That was legitness. That was, huh?
And we're going to
Thanks,
let him
Earl.
cook.
Let him cook now. Let him cook.
Earl is making it rain, gifting memberships out to everybody. Thank you, Earl Carr, again. You are the dude that is the dude. Thank you so much, sir. And now, again, thank you, Earl Carr. I didn't say it enough already. Now we'll get the last call. Sure, the media asset up here. Last call, Rock and Rant. Last call. What do you want to say? Got anything, Rock and Rant?
Oh, I'm sorry. You cut out there for a second.
Sorry.
No, just and Mo, and correct me if I'm wrong. Just next week we will not be going up against the Super Bowl, but I think we're planning on doing a Moen after dark, but before dark
Yes.
show earlier in the day. So stay tuned for an update on there. We'll talk a little bit about the game, maybe from like a college perspective and who's like being repped in that game and whatever news comes up this week. But hey, last week was completely nuts. Nothing I'm looking forward to other than to find out more about what we began to hear on the ACC deal. If any news leaks out that in fact teams did vote against it, if Clemson and Florida State have made any progress with the ACC in settling, and all of the Big Ten information in terms of them also possibly being interested in the private equity thing. So the offseason remains nuts, and now we have another round of coaching searches for Ohio State, which is most likely going to create another round of coaching searches for schools further downstream.
And the carousel continues. I gotta get some carousel music on the soundboard. Thank you for mentioning that, Rock. Yes, next week is Super Bowl Sunday. We'll do a Moen afternoon. I thought about doing Moen in the morning, but it would just put too much stress on poor Rock and Ran on the East Coast, on the West Coast, to jump on 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I would just say this last call. Listen, when you're the winner, when you're at the top of the mountain, everybody's looking to get there too. And the easiest way to get there is to rob you. And Jim Knowles, Chip Kelly, Justin Fry, wish those guys nothing but the best on their future coaching endeavors. I have to have my trust in Ryan Day to get this done and hire more great guys that can then be poached 2 to 3 years down the road when we win another national championship. So for myself, Rock and Rant, I want to give special shout outs to Jacobra Cat, Mosito X, Earl Carr, Stormy Cyclone for all giving us some support tonight. You guys help us keep the lights on here. Thank you to all the fans who tune in tonight. Everybody on Twitter. We had over 400 viewers at one point. Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. We love answering your questions. We love putting these comments out there, getting your fan feedback. No Big Ten Mafia show tomorrow night. We've still got to get together and record it. But Tuesday night at 8 p.m., there will be a Big 12 Mafia show with Nate. And I believe he's interviewing somebody, but I don't know who it is. So follow Nate on Twitter at Big 12 Mafia. For myself and Rock and Rant, I just want to say peace out. We'll see you guys next Sunday before the Super Bowl.